You're listening to Straight No Chaser, the only show to quench your talk radio thirst. Some programs dilute the issues. We only serve the hard stuff. Old school, new school. Grab a glass and welcome your hosts, the Chief, MBZ, and Pastor C.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Straight No Chaser. Sitting across from me is Pastor C.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful, Chief. Great to be here.
Good to have you here, Pastor C. And of course, sitting with us this evening is Miss Susan, who is filling in for Ambeezy, who is on vacation this evening.
Good evening.
And of course, in the background, you're going to hear in a second an incident in El Paso, which involved an officer attempting to make an apprehension, and the situation got out of hand. And that's going to kind of direct our conversation tonight. And the issue tonight is policing in America. Does everyone feel respected and protected? And of course, as everyone knows, police work is a very noble and challenging profession.
Yes, sir.
Every day, thousands of men and women of every race, religion, and gender, they go out there to protect our communities. They miss birthdays, they miss holidays, and normally they run towards situations where most of us will run from. And of course, I did this profession nobly for 25 years and have seen a lot and heard a lot. But of course, we know that police officers are given the authority to investigate. They're given the authority to detain, seize property, and unfortunately, when appropriate, they have the authority to take a life. That is a huge responsibility. And like any profession, mistakes are made, and unfortunately, there are those that are in the profession that have no business being there. So tonight, we're going to discuss policing in America. Does everyone feel protected and respected? So recently, in El Paso, they had an incident, and let's listen to that if we can. And as you can hear from that incident, Pastor C and Miss Susan, it was total chaos in the background. And I think you heard a lot of different things. And just so that our listeners know, as this incident progressed, the officer made several apprehensions. There was one apprehension that he was attempting to make. He was called there for a trespassing complaint. And during the course of that complaint, he ended up arresting one juvenile. And as the video was showing, that he had one of the young men pinned by his neck, by his knee, and one of the arresting officers, rather, and one of the backup officers responded to the scene. And as the young people were cursing and doing those and shouting all kinds of things, the officer pointed his weapon at a group of youngsters. And this, of course, was to the dismay of many of the community members that were out there and many of the folks that viewed the video. And of course, as with every situation, there's always two sides to the story.
Yes.
So with that in mind, let's get into this discussion, and we'll talk about other incidents as we move forward, Pastor C and Miss Susan. But when we look at this, give me your thoughts on policing in America. Does everyone feel protected and respected?
Chief, first of all, I would like to say that this is a major topic, and I believe that our viewers or those who are listening can really chime in and begin to share some insight with this particular topic. From my perspective, I really believe that we're in a day and time where people do not feel safe around law enforcement. We are afraid at routine traffic stops because we've seen innocent people lose their lives at routine traffic stops. We've seen young men murdered in the street, and I'm sure that there are a plethora of reasons as to why certain things happen. But in today's time, society is afraid, and I don't feel that they feel protected, number one. And because of that, there is a lack of respect. And it's not just a lack of respect as it relates to the community towards officers. I believe it's a lack of respect as it relates to officers towards people and the community, which causes this horrible clash between citizens and law enforcement. And Chief, this is going to be a good conversation tonight. But to answer your question, I do not believe that people in general as a whole, feel protected and respected when it comes to law enforcement.
Well, as you know, we give it straight, no chaser.
Yes, sir.
So is that the community in general? Are those certain communities that don't feel safe? Give me your perspective on that, you and Miss Susan.
Well, certainly the black community don't feel protected, and neither, and I'll speak for ourselves, for me as well, we don't feel respected either.
I look at your hometown. What happened to the lady from Puerto Rico the other day?
Chicago, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Where she had a permit to have a gathering, and someone, started yelling at her, "Go back to Puerto Rico." Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. It's a territory, and the police officer did nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Right. Now,
are you kidding me?
Now, I want to ask you, Chief. I mean, before we get deep into conversation, is policing limited or influenced by racism, classism? I mean, when you guys are in the academy, are you taught to treat people differently because of their race or their economical status? And I think that will help us come up with some conclusions in our discussion today. Is there a difference in how you are supposed to interact with the public?
Well, in the police academy setting, of course, at least all the academies that I'm familiar with, the recruits are taught to respect the community as a whole. It doesn't matter whether you go into someone's house that is a Klansman, whether you're dealing with someone from the Nation of Islam, whether they're gay, whatever the situation is, that is a tax-paying citizen that has called for your services or is requiring the service of the police department. That, of course, is in the ideal world. But as you know, the academy is made up of human beings.
There we go.
And so all of us come to the academy with certain life experiences, with our own set of biases and prejudices and so forth. And what the academy and the subsequent in-service training, once you become a sworn officer, is supposed to help you to deal with that, to sort of compartmentalize all of your beliefs. So, for example, you may not agree with the gay lifestyle.
Right.
But you've been sent to a call, and members of the gay and lesbian community are the ones who are receiving that service. Well, that officer, he or she, is supposed to be able to compartmentalize those beliefs that he brought in the door and to deal with whatever facts are coming out of that situation. So if it's one person is beating on someone or it's a customer complaint, whatever it is, you put your feelings aside and your beliefs and you serve that customer. Consequently, the officers who were part of the details when the Klan was protesting in Maryland and D.C. Now, regardless of what you believe about the Klan and the historical things that you know about the Klan, your job there is to protect those citizens, to allow them to express their constitutional rights of free speech. That's in an ideal world. Unfortunately, do people get in and do people develop things that go totally contrary to the training? Absolutely.
Yes.
So to answer your question, yes, it does happen. And to say that it doesn't, I'd be selling you oceanfront property in Phoenix. Right. It's just not real. It does happen. But that is why police chiefs across the country spend thousands of dollars per officer to train them in cultural diversity, communication skills, de-escalation techniques, so that the officers have these skills in their toolbox. Certainly there are appropriate times when an officer has to come in and use handcuffs and force and those types of things and raise their voices and so forth. There are appropriate times for that. But normally, if you use your mind and you use your communication skills, most reasonable people will comply with what you need done.
And that's my challenge, though, because it seems as if the majority of these incidents are related to officers who seem as if they do not have the skill set to engage certain communities.
You know, I look at the Washington, D.C. area, metropolitan area, and I look at a whole lot of, you know, young guys coming out of Pennsylvania and rural Maryland coming to the, you know, the more inner city and, you know, parts of Maryland and D.C. and policing our community. They have no clue of how to interact with minorities.
I agree.
No clue.
Well, you raise an interesting perspective, and that's a discussion that's been going on in policing for a long time. And I work with officers of every persuasion and belief and so forth. And a lot of them did one hell of a job in some communities in the inner beltways of Maryland and suburban D.C. and so forth. But there are those that, and black and white, that have not experienced some of the challenges in some of the urban communities.
Well, what else makes it so bad is they go back to their rural community. They don't even live in the communities that they police. They live in other counties, other states, you know. So how would they know?
Well, and that gets right back to the cultural understanding and all of that cultural diversity training, communication skills, sensitivity training, and all those other things that the departments offer. So that while that officer is working that beat or working that area, he or she understands that you're in Cabrini Green area, you're in the Park Heights area of Baltimore, you're in Watts. You know, these are some of the challenges in this area. Here are some of the things that you're going to hear. This is when people are serious sometimes. This is when folks might just be joking with you and just trying to establish some rapport with you.
Right.
But again, you have to understand that.
Right.
And to Miss Susan's point, you do have to understand that community and feel like you have a vested interest.
Sure.
In that area that you're serving. If you're serving with the attitude of, man, these people, I don't know what the hell's going on here, but let me do what I have to do and get the hell out of here and live to fight another day.
That's what they do.
That's not an attitude that's going to serve you well.
Right.
But certainly if you are invested in that community, whether it's emotionally or for example, I know out here in Las Vegas, they have a baseball league, and those officers are coaches and umpires and all kinds of other things. So they have a vested interest in that area. I know back in Prince George's County, back in the 90s when I was a one striper, our sergeant allowed us to coach flag football and do all kinds of other things. So we had an interest. We didn't live in that community, but we had an interest in that community. Sure. So we were there after hours. We were coaching and learning these kids' names and learning the moms and dads and guardians and so forth. So there was an interest there. So I think what I'm hearing Susan say is that there need to be more opportunities for folks to get a stake in that community.
Sure. And
to feel like, you know what, if they are having homicides or rapes or robberies or we're having drug addiction, I own some of that too.
Right.
What as opposed to, hey man, that's crazy. Let me get the hell out of here because I don't know what's wrong with, these people.
Right. Right. But this is very, 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 very dear to my heart because I'm a community leader. I'm a pastor. Okay. And so I believe because of the public occurrences that have happened throughout our nation, respect has been lost. And the community does not look to the law enforcement community as a place of safety anymore. When you have a child being murdered in the street,